Friends, joining us today is Dietrich Thompson. Dietrich and I worked together years ago at T-Mobile, where he was an HR business partner and did a lot of work in diversity. He's currently out on his own as a principal HR consultant for Artifex Soul, a wonderful organization where he focuses a lot on high-performing teams and leaders. He's also a facilitator at Cornell in some of their HR courses and a lifelong this diversity advocate, and has written some children's books that bring in the themes of multiculturalism and diversity. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation with Dietrich. It's been wonderful catching up with him after all these years, and we're going to have some really light, fast discussion about inclusion in teams and how this actually is something that all teams can do wherever they are. Dietrich, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this conversation. These topics never get old for me. So if you need to rein me in, feel free.
Okay. Well, I just want to hear the best you got on these topics because I know it's phenomenal. But I wanted to start with a question about your own experience. As you look back at your career, worked for a lot of organizations, you've done a lot of things. You've made a lot of change too and supported a lot of people. When you think about the teams you were on, what experiences come to mind as the types of teams and leaders where it just felt so natural to you? Like it just felt like, yeah, everybody here is included. It doesn't matter. We're all included. And
Yeah.
that we're going to bring out the best in each other regardless. Like, have you had experiences like that in your career? I shouldn't assume you have, but have you?
Yeah. No, well, at this point, I have definitely seen where that shows up really well. And in fact, my first HR experience at IBM, I was on a team that was probably the most diverse team I've ever worked on. I mean, it literally had representation from all walks of life, whether you talk about gender, sexuality, age, ethnicity, it just covered it all. And I think what was so powerful about it is the leader at the time really set the tone for how we were going to work together, right? And so that was probably, to this day I look at that picture of that group, and it reminds me how powerful that can be. We were at a location that was going through a lot of change, and so we were a leadership team, HR leadership team, that had to make a lot of decisions. And I think where we really got the value is that, again, so we had some people who had been at the site for some years, and they knew the history, and they knew, the people, and could really weigh in on that. Then we had others who, at the time, like myself, who had a different energy and a view as a recent college graduate regarding what was possible, and I think then how the decisions that we were going to make as a team were going to play out and affect the different people in the organization. And so those type of rich discussions, the leader just gave such license for everybody to have a point of view and perspective, regardless of if it was agreed upon or disagreed upon. So it wasn't going to be, these situations where, if you had a counter opinion, it was going to be shut down. It was, all things were considered, and I really appreciated that, especially as a person who was, just like I said, who had just recently graduated, because it gave me a sense that I had a voice. But it also taught me the importance of listening to wisdom, and understanding history and things like that. So yeah, that was probably the best experience I had in that space.
It sounds like a marvelous early career experience
Yeah.
because there are lots of people of every diversity characteristic we can imagine who don't ever have that opportunity for a leader to role model those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so for somebody early in their career to say, and I love the phrase you just used, which is to find out what was possible and to have that space created by a leader for a team where so much is possible, despite constraints, despite change, despite transformation. It's like we can create a space where we can explore what's possible. That's a little bit of what I hear and that you benefited from early in your career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I mean, for me, it also it goes to not just the leader because the team itself, as you know, it had a life of its own as well, and you know, the people in the team were also very open. They had worked at various places, and so you know, they were able to bring all that into the discussion, as well as you know, be respectful of each other, because there was no there. You know, as I think back, there was literally no three or two people who were the same at all. We had religious differences. I mean, it was just across the board, and so you know, as I've sort of gone throughout my career, whenever I get an opportunity like that, I'm grateful for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would even myself push that point one step further, which is like we are all radically unique.
Mm.
We all exist on so many different continua.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we talk a lot about certain continua, things like race or gender, or sex or generation or location, or and there are a lot of employee resource groups that are aligned to Hispanic employees or Black employees or veterans or working moms or what it may be. But in fact, we all show up um, just being us, just having our story. We're not some reduction of a particular color or a type or a preference. We're always so much more than that. Do you find that to be true when you either write children's books or coach or consult on topics like uh, diversity and multiculturalism?
Yeah, yeah, I would say so, and I think part of that is sort of listening, really being a good listener for those identifying those intersectionalities as well as those commonalities that occur. You know, I've had some of the, for example, leaders tell me, "Hey, you know, when you said, you know, this is something that other female leaders have experienced, that really." Sort of validated for me that it's not just me. And I was like, yeah, there's power in understanding that. There's also a lot of power and affirmation in understanding that um, you don't have to sort of accept this thing. You can do something about it. And so, you know, when we talk about coaching, when we talk about giving people that agency, you know, and to your point, recognizing that they may be on some continuum and all that, but all that is in them. And it's important for them to leverage all of those differences inside themselves to be successful and move forward, I think.
What do you think? Are there limits to what's possible if a team and a leader really find that full sense of agency within that sense of ownership within the
Hmm.
magnificent diversity of a team? Like so often, I think we live in organizations and teams with all these embedded constraints. You can't do this. You can't do this. You can't do that. That's not possible. We don't have budget. And I don't think we ever flip that script much and just say, imagine what's possible with those of us who are here if we would just feel that deeper sense of agency and ownership. Have
Mm,
you had perspectives like that? Things where it
yeah.
just kind of somehow opens up because of the mindset we take?
Yeah, yeah. No, it is why you want to be careful, I think, as a leader, either you or someone on the team doesn't shut down a conversation too soon. You know, if you were to sort of borrow from insights and say, okay, you know, we have people who may lead with yellow and be these big idea folks, and then you got the folks who are data driven and then the drivers that are red, is to say is to you know, maybe you start out the conversation recognizing that so that people lead give each other license to sort of speak their thoughts and minds and how they see things. And so you know, we would say, um, just as an example, hey, you know, Susan, you always sort of start these discussions with some really great insights and ideas. I'd love to hear your perspectives, and then you know, maybe go to the person who leads with blue and say, hey, you know, what data do you think would be helpful in helping us understand what's going on here, right? And so you've got this leader recognizing the strengths and the differences in their people, calling it out and saying it's valued, and sort of letting it go from there, right? They talk, you're hearing this recently around economic differences that maybe, um, I grew up in a upper middle class household, and maybe Ben grew up in a lower to middle class household, and so Ben is really adept at figuring out how to save money and be really helpful and judicious about expenses. And so Ben is going to then bring that in and say, hey, we can do this, and here's how we can make it work without busting the budget, right? And then that leader pulls that in, right? And allows for that person to again demonstrate their uniqueness. Yeah,
It's a great example. Great example. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. How about just as I sort of run through that, I think to myself, then what would you say as you sort of look through the journey of this of your professional career, where you've seen that really be beneficial to a team?
Yeah, I think thank you for the question. I think my
Hmm.
first response has to do, and I look back over my career and the people who were mentors, actually, the people who had a real formative impact on not just my career, but just how I thought about a job.
Hmm.
And just for me personally, I look back on the people who either believed in me or said, this is a huge challenge. I think you can rise to it.
Hmm.
And it could be that a leader only said that once over 18 months, but it stuck so deeply.
Yeah.
And I don't, I don't know where I'd be if I didn't have a string of leaders and mentors and guides, and just over the course of my career, who said, "You can give this a shot. Go try that. Try that role. Take on that challenge and see how you do."
Mhm, mhm,
And I think it just leads me to where I am today. And I really love your comment around even like say economic class and where we come from. Um, but I think no matter where you come from, or no matter what your background is, you bring perspectives and abilities and lived experiences that can be useful for a team.
yeah,
What we don't ever really do is find a way to unlock that for each other.
yeah,
Like if you didn't know Ben had come from that particular, in your example, economic background, but you also never asked or opened the outdoor for me to have like that real cost savings perspective,
yeah,
then it's a strength that's untapped. And I
yeah,
think that's the case for most of our teams. It's like there are so many ambient and residual strengths that everybody brings through their
mm,
wide diversity of experiences, no matter who they are. And then we kind of trap people, it's a bad word, but they're
yeah,
just reduced to a meeting,
yeah, yeah,
that, and
yeah,
rather than seeing each other as full, complex, emerging human beings. And that's where I think the real value is found in teams.
yeah. No, it is. And I think you've sparked so many things in my mind around the studies that they've done regarding people being able to sort of be themselves. One in particular for me, that Harvard study where they measured people and asked, every ethnic group, how comfortable are you being yourself at your job? And it varied, and they included, for example, white professionals, and even white professionals, if you will, because so many times this gets focused on people of color. Even white professionals gave a percentage or degree in which they could not feel comfortable being themselves, right? And so there was, as you put it, but earlier, there's a spectrum in that. But I think the key part for me is then this is why we do sort of group activities to give people a chance to get to know each other so that I see you more than just that person in front of me in their job. I have to know that you have a backstory, and to the extent you're comfortable sharing that, or we as an organization have earned the right to hear your story. Then you get, as a leader, you can give people that license to say, hey, I know that you may have a different perspective on this situation, or your thoughts or your experiences might be different than mine, and that's okay. We're not going to sort of brand it as someone causing trouble or not looking at it the right way, right? So yeah, I really enjoy that, and the second part that you mentioned to me earlier around those people who just sort of characters in your story that have really, even if it was one conversation or by example, have influenced how you see things, right? That can be really powerful. Whether especially if it's at the right time in your career, right? To give you that energy. Yeah.
My earliest mentor in this profession threw me into the deep end,
Hmm.
and in some ways, I think perhaps inappropriately, but put me on a stage
Yeah.
in front of hundreds of people, and he said, You'll do great, figure it out." And I'd never done anything like that. But when
Yeah.
you do it and you realize, I survived, I did find a way, it went
Yeah.
just fine, and then you develop some meta cognition or meta self identity of like, well, I could do that. I could certainly try other things too. And I think that's such a gift to give anybody at any time, but particularly people earlier in their career. Really.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think even the funny thing is that even if it wasn't wonderful, you still have done it, and you can do it, right? And so if you keep going with that, then you think, oh, what if I tried this, or what if I took it from this approach? And now you are really trying to find your space, right? I got to tell you something funny though. Like you, I had been asked to do something like that, and I was like, why do they want to hear me? You know, you've got all these folks here who've been here for however many years and all that, and they're like, well, Dietrich, you're like a game show host. You really? I was like, a game show host? What are you saying? I said, but at some point, I embraced that, and I said, you know what? What they're saying is that you are approachable. You bring folks in, and you've got to think of it like this is your role, right? Is to sort of make people feel welcome on this stage. And so yeah, it is one of those things when you, I think, you accept who you are, right? And sort of take it, that agency again. Yeah.
Really. And that acceptance, right?
Yeah.
The sense of belonging
Yeah.
when you're with others, and that sense of, yes, first we must accept ourselves.
Yeah.
And but then we can offer that gift to other people. And I think that's really where inclusion and belonging play out on teams. It's just between humans. Even if
Mm-hmm.
we disagree, even if we have professional differences, we have different theories about how work gets done or different lived experiences, different origin stories. Like in some ways, I think it's all got to be okay.
Yeah.
We can be here and I can accept me and I can accept you. And then we can open a pathway to finding our best answers. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so what's your favorite game show then? And I'll move us towards close here, Dietrich. So the game show, which one would you be on or would you host?
Yeah, that is a good question. What's game show? Um, I guess I got to go with the classic Bob Barker because he was just so cool about, and he had these people coming up with all kind of excitement and energy and whatnot. And again, what I appreciated is that he did not try to calm them down. He went with it and took the show forward. He leveraged that energy, but he was always cool, Bob Barker. And so,
The Price is Right.
the
Good one.
price is right. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So last question for you, Dietrich.
yeah.
If you had one wish for the next generation, for the next folks, you and I, our times in organization will end, but there's another generation and another one behind that. And you could create a wish for, let's just say, the humanity of people who come into organizations. What
Mm.
would you wish for them?
I would wish for them to stay curious. Don't get jaded. Don't, in spite of what you hear and see in the news, recognize that again, everybody has a story, a backstory, an interest, a perspective. Stay curious about that. Because in these days and times, it's very easy to just sort of tell yourself one story about a person or a situation and lose sight of things. And there's been so many business cases where that has been unfortunately led to bad outcomes for the organization, and or people in their career who have passed up top talent or great performers because they didn't fit a mold of what that person. And I said, this is why you have to stay curious about people and realize that there's more to them than meets the eye, if you will.
Beautifully said, my friend.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for joining today. I really loved hearing your perspectives, and all the best in everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Ben, and I appreciate it, and I enjoyed the conversation as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Dietrich.